Hello, welcome back. We have our sixth installment in the V Rising solo brutal adventure. In the last one, things got a little wild as I struggled to face Krieg, the undead general, but in the end we got him, which I think brings our total bosses defeated to 24, is that right? If you missed the previous videos, personally I would recommend watching them so you know what's going on, but if you're just curious about game settings, we have the V-Blood multiplier set to plus 25 instead of plus 70, and gear level set to plus 1 instead of plus 3, and some of the loot and crafting speeds are turned up just to prevent the game from getting too grindy. I've got a little castle in Dunley Farms that I probably won't change much. I'm not super invested in the building, though I do really like the building in this game. I just don't want to do a whole bunch of it. After defeating Krieg, we had to do some vampire chores, smelt iron, do some research, get our spells situated, things like that. As far as builds go, I'm playing this run very loose and exploring a lot of different options. V-Rising makes this super easy because you can switch weapons, spells, jewels, basically whenever you want without any sort of like punishment for doing so. Like you don't have to grind more resources. You can just like add and remove things and swap them out. And our first big task for this part is to find and defeat Bane the Shadowblade. I love Bane for two reasons. One, I like the little human form you get when defeating him. I think it's very cute. You just got your little coat on, and I just think it's adorable. It reminds me of the main character in Chants of Sennar, which I haven't played myself, but I have watched a couple playthroughs of it. Very cute game. And honestly, if the human form was a little faster, I would run around in human form all the time. Bane also drops the slasher weapons, which have been my favorite for all of my multiplayer runs. I find that they just fit my playstyle very well. So I usually go for the slashers, though I'm trying to branch out in my next multiplayer run, which hopefully we'll be able to do in a couple weeks from the time I'm recording this, which is currently the middle of August. Bane is not only a wandering boss, but he is also disguised as a human. So anytime you see a human in a little cloak walking down the road, it could be Bane. And he actually helped us defeat Vincent. If you remember, Vincent caught him with one of his attacks and unveiled him, and that started a fight with Bane. And I am glad that the blood tracking is not fooled by Bane's disguise, or this would be a very annoying boss to find, just randomly searching every human in a cloak on the road. Bane is kind of a rogue character, so he does a lot of leaping and slashing. He also has these shadow bolts. I feel like every V Rising fight has some sort of little elemental bullets that you can eat with your shield, and that for Bane it's these little shadow things. Or I guess they're probably chaos things, I'm not sure. The beginning of this fight is not too bad. Get out of the way of his AoE, avoid the shadow bullets or catch them with the shield, block his little swipes. He's very much a melee guy. At a point in the fight, he will do a kind of interesting ads phase where he summons a bunch of the cloaked humans. And I think the objective of this phase is that you have to find which one is Bane. I used my Death Knight spell for this fight, and it actually seemed to work really well to hold his attention. Since Bane is mostly a melee guy, having the skeletons and the Death Knight near him kept him from following me around too closely. However, they were very weak to his AoE, so they weren't like a... So they weren't really a help in terms of dealing damage, they were more of a distraction, as they usually are. And again, I'm not really sure what the trick is with the disguised guy phase. It seems like I found him first try every time. I'm not sure if that was luck or if I'm misunderstanding the goal of this phase. But we managed to get through it. The sun came out near the end of the fight, but I had some trees nearby that didn't get knocked down by the battle, so that was okay. And there, Bane was actually a first try brutal win. Kind of a long fight, it dragged on a little bit, but went very smoothly. I went home and made myself some slashers, and it felt good. I love these little guys. First of all, they look cool. The most important thing, they're very cool to look at. They also come with a stealth move that can help sometimes. I think it can help you sort of drop aggro and avoid being targeted by certain moves, but it doesn't totally help with a lot of boss fights because a lot of bosses can still kind of target you even if you're in this shadow mode. So it's not a fix for everything, but it is quite useful. And it also has a dash that can help you get out of the way of certain moves. It's a little bit snappier than the axe the axe attack that drags you forward. And then also it brings you back to your starting position, so it's a lot more predictable where you're going to be. And as I'll find out later in the run, or as I'll confirm later in the run, just because I like the slashers a lot does not mean they are the best for every fight. I still do a lot of swapping, and I still do find other weapons to be like way more useful for certain things. Next, I went out for some looting. I focused on finding some of the pink cherry blossom trees because they're cute, and I wanted my base to be cute. And while I was out looking for them in some of the Dunley Farms areas, I looted all the human houses, snatched up some cotton and some sunflowers and stuff. I did a little bit of fishing to feed my friends, and I geared up my servants a little bit more and sent them out on some nice missions. And I'll just say now, as I'm playing through all these things, real life days are passing. I'm going to work, playing at lunch, playing in the evening. And as I'm doing this, I'm basically always sending my servants out if I'm not going to be online for a little bit. So I'm making use of the hunts to collect some extra resources, even if I don't show every single time I do it on the screen. I spend a lot of time here farming materials for paper and scrolls so I could do some more research, and then I set out on my next boss fight. We're getting near the end of Act 2. I do think Act 2 is the longest act in the game, and I have a few options for who I think I can fight next, and ultimately I decide to go for Raziel. For some reason, I set my blood tracking up to follow General Elena, but then I went to fight Raziel. I think I just remembered where he was and forgot that I had the blood tracking on for someone else. Raziel the Shepherd is a church guy who does a lot of holy damage, so you'll need holy resist potions for this fight just to get into the church, and if you don't have that, you will get a little bit roasted before you can even get in the door. I spend a lot of time at this church because in one of my previous runs, I was looking for a high level nun to be one of my servants because I just think they're so cute. And you know what? I never really found one. I ended up settling for one that was pretty low level if I remember. But I spent a lot of time in here looking at Raziel's nuns and then leaving. Raziel does a few things that are very annoying, but he's not too tricky. All of it really boils down to dodging AoEs. He doesn't really do a lot of hands-on attacks. He does some holy bullets and a laser and an AoE, and he spawns orbs. So let's talk about the individual things. These orbs are kind of like ads, except they don't really move. They just do these little attacks near them. And I believe if they go too long, if they live too long, they will explode. So you want to get these down. He also spits out holy things that circle around and do damage. And then the crotch laser is kind of his ultimate. So he shoots out this laser. It pretty much fills up the church. But the trick here is that his turning speed is limited. So if you're close, you can sort of dodge around behind him. And it's harder for him to hit you with that. But it is pretty devastating. So that's kind of the move to watch out for. It also helps to have skellies so that they draw his attention, because if he's not aiming at you, it's much easier to avoid the laser. There's also a holy circle that you should get out of before it explodes. And as I said, just lots and lots of holy AoE flying around the screen in big circles, the laser. This fight really is just kind of a bullet hell. I got him down in I think I'm in a place in the run where I'm like higher gear level for the section, so I'm getting a lot of these bosses down much easier than in some other parts of the game. And it's hard to say whether I've got the difficulty balance right, because some bosses, like these past couple, I definitely could have done on default settings, I feel like. And then there's some other ones that I know with certainty that I could not, especially a couple that are coming up. So it's hard to get the difficulty exactly right all the way through, but I think I did a pretty good job. Raziel unlocks the jewel crafting table, so I took this time to build out a room for jewel crafting, because the jewel crafting objects has its own floor. That gives a little bonus, so I want to make sure I've got that bonus before I do too much crafting in that area. I recently built the Eye of Mortium as well, which unlocks the ability to see the rift incursions, but I actually haven't been to Mortium yet. There's no sunlight in Mortium, and it's mostly inhabited by vampires and they're vampiric creatures. Unfortunately, they're not our friends. Even though we're both vampires, we apparently don't see eye to eye. But General Elena is in here, so we're on our way in. And I literally wandered into Mortium and immediately found an 88% Night Maiden. I love these sexy succubi, so I'm very pleased that I found one so fast. She will be a servant in my house, and it's a great idea to have at least one servant from Mortium, because then you can send them to the servant hunts here and get some Stygian shards, without doing quite as much grinding. So whether it's a Night Maiden or one of the guys with the big axes, I think you can tame them as well. There's some beefier guys. What are they called? Exsanguinators. There's a lot of options here, but unfortunately you can't dominate the little like imps or some of the bigger guys. I haven't tried a gargoyle. It seems extremely difficult to even try, and I'm sure it won't work. So a lot of options for a Mortium servant, but I would recommend at least one. I used a dust collar to send her home and continued on my way. General Elena the Hollow wanders about in Mortium with a little group of her friends, and she is an ice girl. She does several different icy AoE attacks. Some of these should look very familiar. I think Vincent had some identical attacks. I tried my best to pick off her buddies without taking too much damage, started using the trees and rock formations to block some of the attacks. And at some point she will go up onto an ice pillar, and you have to kill the pillar to be able to attack her again. I used the longbow for this fight, and I think it was the right choice. The range gave me the mobility I need to get out of her way, and I like the longbow in general just because it does such big single target damage. It feels very powerful when I use it, and I'm getting used to the pace of it. It's a little bit slow, but I think once you use it a bit, you get a feel for how long the shots take and everything. And I actually got Elena down first try as well. We're really plowing through the middle end of Act 2 here. And again, I think this is just because I'm pretty well geared going so hard on the research. So I'm geared for the end of Act 2, even though I'm still in kind of the middle of it. Elena gives us the Altar of Stygian Awakening, which lets us use the Stygian shards, which we don't have yet, to give ourselves some passive abilities. The Rift Incursions themselves, which give you the shards, have two difficulties. The second one is way too hard for us right now, but we are getting to a point where the first level Rift Incursions are doable. They will probably still be pretty challenging. The Rift Incursions come up on a schedule based on server settings. I think I made mine slightly more frequent, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But once you build the Eye of Mortium, you'll be able to see the timers when they come up on your map. As I was running around, I just happened upon General Cassius. I wasn't intending to fight him right now, but I saw him and I attacked without doing any research or preparation whatsoever. And this ended up being a mistake, which I'll explain in just a moment. So General Cassius the Betrayer is a sword guy. He has a little posse, just like Elena did. And he does some big great sword slashes that you have to be pretty far away from to avoid taking damage. He also does a big leap with an AoE around it. And the sword is important here, and this is where I made my mistake. There's a point in the fight where General Cassius will throw his sword, Nightfall Edge, and it will fly around. It has its own health bar. And naturally, seeing the health bar, I attacked the sword, eventually got it all the way down. And then in the video, you can see it's got this golden aura around it, and it kind of looks like when the legendary weapons are dropped, it kind of looks like that. I didn't realize this indication when I fought him. I couldn't figure out why killing the sword wasn't working. I couldn't attack Cassius. I believe he's immune during this part. What you have to do is walk up and interact with the sword. But I was floundering. I didn't understand the fight. I didn't remember it. I actually don't know off the top of my head if the normal moveset does this sword throwing thing, but if it did, it's possible that one of the other people I was playing with did the actual throwing of it. So I died, went in for another attempt. This time I didn't have his little group to deal with, so I could get right into it. And this time, when I killed the sword, I happened to wander close enough to it to see the sword option, throw sword. So I did that, and then you do throw the sword at Cassius. He gets stunned, and then you can really wail on him for a minute before he recovers from that. Then after 50% or so, things start to get a little bit more crazy. He does all these big unholy AoEs that extend out really far before he returns to some of his early fight attacks. So make sure you have room to get away from those big AoEs. You can just walk in between them, there's some space there. And with that, finally figuring out the basic mechanics of the fight that I did not look up, I got Cassius on the second try. Not too bad. At this point, there are just 3 bosses left in Act 2, and I'm not sure who I'm going to go for next. I ran around Mortium to get some more of the waypoints unlocked so I can come back for some quick rift incursions later, and then I headed home to unload my loot and do some of my vampire chores. I grabbed a whole bunch of Draculan blood from my Night Maiden before I converted her to a servant, just to have it on hand. I actually don't love the Draculan blood because it's mostly good for increasing your bite charges or bite cooldown, whatever it does. Most of the fighting I like doing, which is boss fights, does not benefit from that. Weird that you can't bite the bosses. I guess that's not so weird. It would be like a balancing issue, I think, but I feel like I should be able to get in there and take a good chomp. But after getting my home situated a little bit, I'm on a roll with these bosses. I went after Terah the Geomancer. In this fight, I actually did look up before I went into it, and that helped because this is an interesting fight, and there's some things that she does that could not be super obvious on a first attempt. So being a geomancer, Terah immediately turns into a big golem, and she also starts spawning rocks, and they look like normal rocks, but it is important to prioritize attacking them because the rocks will turn into little golems of their own, and they're a little bit harder to kill when they turn into golems. So I like the longbow for this one as well because I feel like it just does a lot of damage to these rocks. It has the AoE that's still pretty high damage because it's kind of narrow. You can destroy a lot of the rocks this way, and then also handle the adds if they come up. When they come up, I don't know if anyone can actually get all the rocks down. Probably someone can, but I would recommend something with high single target damage like the longbow, or maybe the hammer. The big hammer smash probably destroys these rocks pretty good. So there will be phases in the fight where these rocks are spawned, then they turn into golems, and then there will also be this little like dog-shaped golem tethered to the boss that you'll need to first avoid getting attacked by. It does some little lunges and attacks like that. And then I think the dog provides a shield. You can see this like green aura. Once you kill the little dog, it removes that shield. And this is another fight where you should just always keep moving. You have a lot of things to watch out for, but most of it doesn't move very quickly, so it's a little bit more my speed. She'll do big ground AoEs every once in a while, and these fist pound attacks that are fairly quick, but most of the fight is kiting these golems around, killing rocks, and trying not to get tackled by the little dog. Once you do enough damage, she will turn back into a person for a little bit, and this is your chance to really destroy her before she turns back into a golem, and the cycle starts again. I was killed on my first attempt and realized that a shield spell is not a great pick for this one, and I switched to 2 offensive moves, the skeleton bullet, corrupted skull I think it's called, and chaos volley. I had to wait for the sun to go down for another attempt because this arena is completely unshaded. It's fully out in the open. You really can't do this fight during the day. And I realized during the second try that my spells were not really doing that much to destroy the rocks. Using my weapon was a lot more effective for that, so I avoided wasting my spells in places where they weren't doing very much. This is a very long fight because everything is so slow, so make sure you have enough nighttime to do it, and you're not going to get caught in the middle with the sun, because it would be really frustrating to spend like 3 minutes kiting this lady around only to get roasted by the sun. Second try, I was doing a lot better. I got a feel for the rhythm of this fight very quickly, and I was able to keep those priorities straight. Focus on the rocks, the golems, the dog, the boss, always moving. And eventually I did get her down. Terah gives us the ability to create larger gems out of the smaller ones somehow. Another, video game logic thing that doesn't make a lot of sense for reality, but they wanted to give you something to do with those little gems later in the game. We can just say it's magic. She also unlocks the ability to make a siege golem, which I have never used. I think these are mostly used for PvP. Immediately after defeating Terah, I queued up the blood tracking for Jade the Vampire Hunter, but I noticed that there was a rift incursion starting, and I need those Stygian shards, so I took a little break and went over back to Mortium. You'll probably need to grind out at least a few of these, so I'll just talk about this one, and then I'll probably skip over future ones unless something cool happens. But the way these incursions work is that in each of the highlighted zones, when the incursion starts, there will be a series of crystals that you need to clear. So you start at the center of the zone, you'll see a big ghostly black line that leads you to where the next crystal is. And if you kill all the mobs at the crystal, it will explode, dropping shards everywhere. And then if you go back to the center, you'll be able to see the next one. And I believe the number of crystals is based on how many players are in the area. I think it does scale for more players if you're on multiplayer, because I feel like when I've been playing solo, it's been 2 crystals and then the boss, but I've definitely seen 3 when I was playing on a different server, so I don't know which setting that is, or if it's just a difficulty scaling, but you'll know when you're done because you'll find a familiar face in the center. There will be a lesser blood soul, which is a boss in the form of one of the other game bosses. So they'll have the moves, they'll look like that boss, but the the difficulty is kind of scaled to the Rift Incursion, and it's not as difficult as like a boss is at this level. I think it's slightly easier. That said, I still had a little bit of trouble with these at the level that I'm at. So the first one I got was Quincy, who I remember well because he gave me such a hard time. While you're fighting the Lesser Blood Soul, you will also have to contend with the normal Mortium ads running around. They respawn at this crystal in the middle. They also patrol through here. I died on this first attempt, but luckily these bosses don't reset when you die, so you can just go back in and finish them off. And then for this event, this incursion event, this area is deactivated until the next one. And if you have time left, you can go to one of the other zones. And there is a time limit for like the whole set of incursions. When that limit is reached, the whole area will just stop being a rift incursion. So even if you're in the middle of fighting a crystal, or if you're in the middle of fighting a boss, they will just vanish. So even if you start it on time, you can't necessarily finish it unless there's enough time for you to do that. So I did another rift area real quick, and that time I got Pelora as my Blood Soul boss, another one that gave me a lot of trouble in this run. After that I headed home, and using the altar we built, now that we have some shards, we can unlock some passive skills. These are very cool. I believe they're just always on, and they do whatever they say they'll do. So the first tier are 400 of these lesser shards each, and then they get more expensive as you go up to tiers 2 and 3. And which of these you pick really depends on your playstyle. I picked one that helps my skeletons be a little bit stronger. You might want to pick something else if you're, like, obviously if you're not using skeletons, or if you're using something else more. Next, I geared up my new Night Maiden, and realized I didn't run far enough into Mortium to actually send her to the zone there. You have to explore the Servant Hunt areas before they become available, and it looks like I did. I must have missed a little corner or something. So instead I went after Jade. Jade is another wandering boss. I guess you have to wander to find the vampires you're hunting, so that makes sense. I killed her little buddies first. She's got some buddies as well. And then got her alone. She is more of a sniper, so her moves are very similar to Tristan's, but more long range, and just like a little bit less erratic. Not totally predictable, but I feel like she's more predictable than Tristan was. She does a laser sight hit that does really big damage if it hits you, but you do have a second of warning to get out of the way, and you can see the laser. So you can see where she's aiming. She can change her aim very quickly, so you do have to be quick on this one. Try to block it with some landscape pieces or something. She also does this little rapid fire cannon bullet attack, and some jumpy moves that have an AoE when she lands. And, very annoying, she drops a bunch of caltrops on the ground, which is just rude if you ask me. So just as with Tristan, it's a good idea to try and use the surrounding area to block some of these attacks. Since she's so range focused, she'll follow you a little bit less closely than Tristan did. She got me on the first try and the second try. I did pretty good on the first try, but the second one was just a bad it's just a bad attempt. I was getting hit by everything. The third try, I swapped my shield back in, with the intent to eat up some of the cannonball attacks, to get some extra skeletons, and this actually worked really well. I also was able to engage her in the fight right next to this big rock formation that I was really able to use to block some of her moves. It's really nice when you just happen upon a part of the landscape that works super well for a certain fight. And after some dodging and weaving and mostly hiding behind my skeletons, I did eventually get her down. As I killed her, she did a jump, and I thought she glitched out for a second because I couldn't see where she went after that, but she was just there on the side of the road. So Jade gives us pistols, which are a really neat weapon that I use a little bit later that give you an extra dodge basically. One of the pistol moves is an attack in like a little dodge roll. They also just kind of feel good to use. It's a shame that you get them so late in the game because you don't get as much time to really learn and enjoy them. Jade also lets you make primal blood essences. So once I got back home, I queued up a couple of those. I have so much blood essence. This is probably a result of having the materials turned up a little bit, because you get blood essence from so many different sources. Having it turned up makes you get quite a lot of them. So I made some primal blood essences, and of course did some more vampire chores. It's this pattern. You fight the boss, you come home, you do your chores, you go fight another boss, you do your chores, do a rift incursion, you do your chores. That's just how it goes with a game like this. But there we go. What progress. By my count, I think we got 6 bosses down in this video, and I think it's gonna end up being a lot shorter than the other videos on top of that. So after this, there should just be one boss left before we get into Act 3. Before I wrapped up for the night, I did also run through Mortium. I did a full lap around the zone that the servant hunt is in the bottom left there, just to make sure I could send my servant out and get some shards. And I would really recommend staying on top of this and sending your servants out as much as you can, because every servant hunt you do is one less rift incursion area that you're going to need to grind out. So it'll just save you some time later. And I think we will call it here. Very soon we will be getting into Gloomrot and the Cursed Forest, which are very cool and also potentially frustrating. So don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe, because I'll be back with another video soon, and I hope to see you there. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.